On today's episode of Locked On Avalanche, the Avs make some moves through trade and through the waiver wire. Are they questionable? Let's talk about them. New episode of Locked On Avalanche coming at you.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Chris Maselli. With me, as always, is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. Thank you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. Make sure you're following us on our social media outlets, LPN_Avalanche on Twitter, X, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram and Threads. Questions, comments, concerns, and opinions, Locked On Avalanche at gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live, and make sure you're subscribed to our subtext as well. Link to that's in the show notes below. And when you do, you chat with Kyle and I one-on-one. We get your opinion, everything Avalanche related, which we share on this very podcast. All right, sir, we have opening day right around the corner. So we're going to, through these moves, do these moves have any impact on the opening roster? We'll talk about what we think that's going to look like against Vegas. But yeah, we're going to start with a couple of moves here done by the Avalanche over the weekend, both on the defensive end, and both things, to quote the great CNC Music Factory, Mr. Sullivan, things that make you go,
Great. Now that's going to be in my head the whole
You're welcome. We'll add that to the sound check. So we'll start with the Brannstrom one. That's the more recent one. He gets traded. So his time in Colorado was very short. You know, they brought him in, just signed him to a 1-year deal, kind of like and when the Avalanche do stuff like that, you always feel like it's going to work out, because we always love to tout the Avalanche track record and bringing in projects, quote unquote, and most of the time them doing okay. And you can point to several individuals where that's happened. You can point to somewhere it hasn't happened too. This is one of the ones where it didn't work out. So they brought him in, try to reinvigorate his career, and didn't work out in the short term. So they trade him to Vancouver. In return, they get a 4th-round pick in next year's draft, and Tucker Poolman, who immediately, I mean, he's already on LTIR. From what I hear, people don't even think like he might even play ever again. He might have to go into early retirement with injuries, namely, I think it's more head injuries and concussions. So he's not even going to be on their books because they already know he's going to be out this year. So his number, which is low, it comes off of their salary cap right away. And I mean, the other part of this is Vancouver immediately turns around and puts Brannstrom on waivers. So could the Avs go get him again? Yes, but they're not going to, because they offloaded him for a reason. But it would be kind of funny if they did. So Vancouver has no, they're gonna, if he passes waivers, which would be interesting if Ottawa picked him back up too. That would be funny. He's going to go down to their AHL team. So a minor move, but an interesting one. We'll start with that one.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we could just say this move was for a pick.
More or less, yeah.
Just Vancouver handed us a pick, the end. And I guess that's cool. The Avs do need draft picks. That's awesome. I'm interested and curious why it was Brannstrom.
Not
like Shillington.
Yes, and that's my question. Yeah.
I wonder if it was a value thing, if that did elicit the pick in return, and Shillington would have been just here 1 for 1. Here's Poolman. We'll take Shillington. But
well, I don't think it would have been 1 for 1, because then the Avalanche are getting literally nothing. So they have to include something, and that something is a 4th-round pick.
So that was a little head scratching, and I'm just curious what that was all about. But at the end of the day, we could just say the Avalanche picked up a draft pick.
The thing with Vancouver, and you have to look at Vancouver's side of this too. So Vancouver offloaded the Poolman contract because he was on LTIR. Now he is off of their books altogether. And I believe they don't have anybody on LTIR now. So now they can accrue cap space, which if you have guys in LTIR, you cannot do that. So that frees that up for them. They are keeping like 20% of his salary, which is not a lot for them. So it's a financial thing for Vancouver. It kind of is as well for the Avalanche, with the added feature of gaining a fourth round pick. Why the Avalanche couldn't just throw Brannstrom on waivers, and if someone claims him, fine, his contract is now off of your books. If somebody doesn't claim him, you can just go put him in the AHL. I don't know why they didn't do that. Maybe just because you're getting a draft pick, and maybe this is what you do. You just kind of shop them around, and if there's no buyers, sure, you put him on waivers. If there is, okay, let's make a deal. And like you said, like you're essentially just getting a fourth round pick, which we all know the Avalanche are light on picks for next year. Even though it's a fourth rounder, who knows? You just sock that away, and maybe you catch lightning in a bottle with whoever you eventually take. So is this a move that like moves any needle? No, it's just an interesting one from the Avalanche perspective, because the day we say a lot on this show about how the Avalanche are patient with guys, and is this like a new realm of the Avalanche where they're not? Because I didn't think Brannstrom was he good in the preseason? No, he could have been better. Was Shillington worse? Yeah. And I mean, if you listen to the episode when we obtained Shillington, I was excited about that. He hasn't shown up. Now, do you turn the page that quickly on guys now, especially guys that you just got? Because it is a new system, and it's a difficult system, and we've seen defenders come over here and need some. Josh Manson is one of them. Need time to get acclimated to a new system in a new town with a new coach, and they must have just felt like either we don't think Brannstrom's gonna get it, he just doesn't fit for some reason, and made the move with him, and still hanging on to Shillington right now. I mean, this all but just buttons up that Sam Malinsky is your day one starter, more than earned it. And that's the thing here is Brannstrom and Shillington have not earned anything yet. That doesn't mean they can't in the future if you keep them around, keep them engaged, keep them active and acclimated. But we just, it's Brannstrom now. You get the feeling that like Shillington is next if they can find a suitor for him. It's weird.
And I don't. The more we talk about this, and the more we kind of like sift it through, I don't think it's so much of turning the page on Brannstrom so quick. I think it's, you pointed out, like Malinsky being that day one guy. I think it's like, as it sits, they have 8 NHL ready defensemen. You have a top 6. If they carry 8, they could do that. It's the first one out, and you're still, even with Shillington, you can still do something with him. You still got a couple days till the season starts.
Right.
I don't think it's so much a Brannstrom not really living up to the hype. I think it's Malinsky's really making a case that you're like, okay, we have this solved. And you look at your NHL roster, and they go with that. They still have, if you want veteran presence, they still have Calvin DeHaan.
Well, DeHaan, I think, is going to be in too. And I mean, he's been okay in the preseason. But you said something which I would have pause at, is like, we have this thing solved with Malinsky. I'm a big supporter of that guy. He has earned it. Do you feel like, yeah, like we're good? I mean, he's got to continue doing what he's doing. He hasn't been there for that long to really do that. So you feel good about slotting him in day one because he had such a good camp. But the season's long. There's ups and downs for teams. There's ups and downs for players. And is Malinsky going to hit a rut at some point in the season? Cale Makar hits ruts at some point in the season. You don't pull him out, obviously, but someone like someone like Malinsky, if he's having a down week or a few game stretch where he's not the best, that's where you slot guys in and out. And that's where Brannstrom could have been like, he's a little bit more seasoned. Sure, he struggled in his career, but if you're working with him in practice and doing what you should be doing on the coaching end staff of things, do you then slot him in if someone, and it could not be someone other than Malinsky, if just something's not working right on the defensive end, you had him as a chip to put in if needed. Now you still have that stuff, like you're saying, like you have some guys that you can do to put in if you do keep Shillington around. We'll get to the other move that they made, which that's it's you still have moves. I'm not saying you don't, but it was just interesting that Brannstrom was kind of like the odd man out, the first man out, if there are other moves here, because he didn't really give him a lot of time to really throw his name into the ring of being one of the guys that can take one of these defensive spots.
Well, real quickly to wrap that, I kind of think we heard it from Sean Payton today in the press conference of the Broncos game. Bo Nix has some Ferris Bueller in him. I wonder if Brannstrom has been around long enough where you ask him to step up and Brannstrom's just like, I got this. Where Malinsky is more teachable and you have more of an upside. Like Brannstrom, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And if that's not adapting to the Avalanche system and you have players that do, you've been through this. Bednar's been here long enough. The front office has been here long enough that they have an idea what they want. And last year you saw players that don't fit the system and not making it through the season. Yeah. They probably got that same read of, hey, Brannstrom, we need you to step up here. And he wasn't doing that. They said, okay, we've been here. We've done that. Move it out. You get a pick.
Which is just so odd because that's usually not how the Avalanche operate. They usually let guys take their lumps, get them, engaged and give them a little bit more time. And it's just odd to see that they didn't do that with Brannstrom. They just, we're just moving on. Part of the other reason why you thought another move was coming here was a move that the Avalanche did before this Brannstrom's trade. And we will talk about that coming up next. First, we're going to hear from Indeed, and we're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. And don't search, match with Indeed, because when you need to hire, you need Indeed, which is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. So ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So listeners of this very show, Locked On Avalanche, will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support Locked On Avalanche by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. And if you need to hire, of course, you need Indeed. All right, so the Avalanche made a move prior to the Brannstrom trade. This one was done on Saturday, I believe, and it was a waiver claim. So it was another defenseman. This one is John Ludvig from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he didn't have a rich history in the NHL. But the first thing that you noticed when you go through his stats and his bio is his size, and that is very welcoming to a Colorado Avalanche team who lacks that really up and down the roster, not just on the defensive end. We were saying for a long time that just Josh Manson is your muscle, pretty much on the entire team. So Ludvig can come in and give that to you. And because this was what makes it the other part of it interesting, like because he's a pickup off the waiver wire, he's got to be on the roster because I don't feel like I believe on waivers. I don't think you can throw a guy on waivers again for I think it's like 30 days or something like that. I could be wrong on the time frame. Whatever it is, because he's a waiver wire pickup, he's given a roster spot. So when that happened, you're like, well, this is interesting. Like this is another defenseman in an already crowded defense for the Avalanche. What's going to happen here? We got some sort of an answer in Brannstrom. I think there's still more to come. But just the move in itself,
The moving,
Is he yeah, I mean, is he fit anywhere or what? What do we do here?
he's 6'1", and this will make you feel great. He was born in the year 2000, so that's awesome. But
Wow.
he played like 33 games for Pittsburgh last year. Really amassed nothing when it came to point totals. So this
It's not his
feels like
thing. Yeah.
a positional player. Like he has a mindset that appeals to what the Avalanche are trying to do. Curious to see what he looks like out there on the ice, especially in the quote unquote Avalanche system. But this one is very interesting. I'm curious to see what they see and how they think he can apply to the burgundy and blue. But I'm not throwing my hands up saying this is horrible or this is wonderful. I'm curious and I want to see it play out.
Yeah, and I don't feel like he's someone that's gonna be on their opening night roster, or I mean opening, like in the starting lineup, I should say that. But is it something for down the road? Maybe. Is this a change in the tide of the Avalanche? Because who they signed in Shillington and Brannstrom is kind of the same player. A guy that's is active offensively, good with the puck, good getting the puck out of the zone, and starting offensive movement. That's not this guy. that is not Ludvig at all. But it is welcoming. It is welcoming to have that. And could this just be who am I thinking of? Who did the guy that fell with the Stanley Cup?
McDermott.
It could McDermott. No, Kubel. McDermott. Could this be a McDermott thing?
Oh, well,
you just have him on the roster, and when you got to slot someone in that's a size, it just he's taking the place of Curtis McDermott.
Well, you also keep in mind the third option for all of these pickups and these little teeny tiny moves is they can also be a package for coming down the road. So you want to also you'll carry them for a little while, and this could be something you lump with that fourth round pick that you got in that Vancouver trade and make something happen. But these aren't the bottom line. Both moves, the Brannstrom out and Ludvig in, these aren't impact moves.
Right.
This is not going to change the complexion of your Colorado Avalanche. They're there just to add a little bit depth wise. And if it's not there, just keep in mind, these are potential package deals for the trade deadline that is coming up.
Yeah. And I always, it's tough to really kind of know where the Avalanche are going with any move. And I've been feeling like this since like all off season until we get like the full roster back, until you get Gabe Landeskog back, until you get
Nichushkin.
Well, I was thinking not Nichushkin.
Lehkonen.
Lehkonen. I was thinking Lehkonen. Until you get him back, obviously Nichushkin. Until you get those guys back, are all of these moves just a precursor to something bigger? Like you said, you could package the fourth round pick, sure, but are you packaging something else, something a little bit bigger, because bigger contracts are coming back into play with obviously Nichushkin and Landeskog? But is that the play? Or all of these little moves just the precursor to a bigger one that needs to be made to get cap compliant when those bigger contracts come into play? I don't know. So that's why it's so tough for me to like really want to nitpick about it. Number one, because like you said, they're depth moves. They're not changing the complexion of the team. And two, it's like nothing is 100% right now in knowing exactly what you're going to have when those guys come back. So I still take these moves with a little bit of a bird's eye view of like, does it just mean something else for something bigger? We'll have to wait and see for that. But for right now, they're interesting. They are interesting moves because you could have just stayed the course. You could have kept these guys around and made moves that you will eventually need to make with these guys. If you're not going to keep them around, you could have just not made these moves at all and just kick the can down the road for when you do eventually need to move someone like Brannstrom or Shillington or whoever you need to move when the big contracts come back in. It's just interesting time. It was a weird weekend.
What you need to view these little moves as like a Bob Ross painting. Every time he starts one and he puts like a mark up there and you're like, this is going to be a good play. This is going to be a good play. And then he goes, oh, I got to move this guy. And then he moves him. 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 And then he what is that? He's messing up this painting. It's going to look
Yeah.
terrible. And then he like moves something or flips the canvas around or
Yeah.
takes the outline off. And you're like, oh, now I see. That's what
Mhm.
this is. These are little marks and little moves. Let the artist work. There's
Right.
bigger
Right.
things, and this is not changing anything. These are little pieces that'll come into play later on.
Right. So it's all very fascinating right now, but you're right. Let's just see, because this isn't the end. I don't feel like. I feel like we have to see how this all plays out. How will it play out for opening night? Let's see if we can just look at this roster and what it might look like, especially with these moves that were made. And there was one other move that we still haven't mentioned because that happened on Friday. We keep going backwards in time for all these moves that the Avalanche made. We'll talk about that one because that had some impact on the forwards anyway. So we'll talk about that and kind of look at this opening night roster when we come back. Let's hear it from FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your very bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's a pretty solid deal. So go over to fanduel.com right now and you place $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed over at fanduel.com. All right. So the move the Avalanche made on Friday, let's get in the Bill and Ted phone booth again and go back to Friday. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare was released from his PTO. And he was another guy that, I think we were all got the warm and fuzzies when they brought him back. And I was a little bit skeptical. The age thing just killed. Again, he's younger than I am. But in hockey sense, 39-year-old playing on this Avalanche team, I just didn't know how it was going to work. I was rooting for him, and I don't think he did particularly horrible in the preseason. But I think the Avalanche might have looked at it as like, can he keep up for the duration of an entire season? Maybe not. So they released him from his tryout, and it was fun while it lasted, Belly, for the few weeks that you were here.
Yeah, I had the warm and fuzzies until that first preseason game, and then I was like, "Oh, no. No.
I didn't think he was horrible, but it's just he doesn't have the step. He doesn't have it.
And it's like going back to the well. Like you want to say this Avalanche team is fast and young, and look at this and look at this, and then you point at Pierre or Bellemare. Like, yes, great memories, great sound bites, but when it comes to the construction of this team, I love you, bud, but just not here, not now.
Right. So because we were all thinking like, hey, that's your fourth line center, and that's his role, and you can get 8 to 10 minutes night out of him, and you'll be happy with that. Clearly, the Avalanche are kind of moving in a different direction here, so that kind of leaves a position open at the 4C. So with that, all of those things that we had just talked about today so far, with the Brannstrom trade, the waiver wire pickup, and Ludvig, and Bellemare being released from his PTO, where do we stand for a opening night roster? And this is not, for the duration of the season. Clearly that changes and that ebbs and flows, but just for night number 1, what are we looking at for an opening night roster? I think your first line is pretty much set in stone with Drouin, McKinnon, and Mikko.
Agreed.
Agree with that? I know people sometimes like to put Mikko down on the second line. Day 1, I don't think you're doing that. Nope. I don't think you're doing that for a little while.
And some people spell Avs with an E, and we don't do that either.
Yeah, it's so true. Second line, it can get interesting here. Middlestad is your center.
Mm-hmm.
Who's flanking him? It's tough. I mean, here's the other part of this. So, I mean, I guess you could just talk about who's making this roster, right? Because the way that Kovalenko's played, he's got to make this roster.
Yeah.
I think Richie, to start the season, he's making this roster. So those are two guys, and then are they on the second line? I don't know. I think to start day one, I'm okay putting Kovalenko up there. I
am too.
really am.
I'm too.
I really am. And I feel bad for Casey Middlestat because he got essentially no time in the preseason. And even in practice, they were just changing the guys that were on the lines with him like daily. So that's going to be interesting to watch who he's paired up with. And does it take a long time for that line to gel with him? Because he's still new, by the way, folks. Like he's not coming into like year 4 with the Avs and he can just put anybody on his line and he'll be fine. This is all new second line for the Avalanche right now, likely.
And I feel like they're kind of giving him the keys to honestly set up his own office. Like the first couple games of this season, Casey's going to be picking out who works with him. You kind of saw that with these rotations, and I feel like that's what it's going to be. Like Nate got Drew in, so Casey gets his pick too. And I think.
All right, we had a little glitch in the matrix, but go ahead. I don't know where you left off, but go ahead.
No, basically, long story short, I feel like the first 10, 15 games with Casey Middlestat, I think he's going to be picking his partner, and really solidifying like that second line. That's Casey's, and they gave him the deal. Like this is his little area to work out. So make it happen. So I feel like that, like sandwich between like the Roaring 20s line, I feel like is going to be semi all together. I say Casey's line is going to be the work in progress, and just curious to see like if fourth line or third line rewards, you get bumped up to Casey's line, see how it works. If it doesn't, you go back down to where you like the line you were starting with.
Yeah, and I really liked Callum Ritchie's preseason, but I feel like just because the second line is just a big, it's gonna be thrown together, and we don't know really what it could look like. I think they maybe want a little bit more a solid line right now to start the season, which is kind of why I'm just throwing this out there. I'd put Ross Colton up there on the wing. You can play wing, and I would move Callum Ritchie to your third line center to start the season. Maybe that's a little bit of a risk, but that's kind of where I would go because I want your second. I mean, if you don't, you're putting Callum Ritchie on a second line along with Kovalenko, and those are two just very raw young prospects with Casey Middlestat. I don't think that's where they want to start off game number 1. So you put Colton up there, solidified a little bit more with Colton, and then Kovalenko is kind of like the wild card, but he's had a really good preseason. So you feel like, hey, let's carry that momentum into game 1 and move Ritchie down to a third line, which is maybe a little bit more, palatable for someone that's, brand new and maybe the bright lights of Vegas for game 1.
To be honest with you, I would have put Ritchie and Kovalenko up there on that second line, at least until Gabe and or Nichushkin come back. Just ride it out. Right. Just see what it does on that second line and have that. If that's not working, if it does, great. If it doesn't, you have the Roaring 20s, which is consistent. They rely on each other. It's another push and another pressure. I feel like that's where Ross should be the center on third. And you got Miles and LOC. I feel like line 3, that should be it. But have your semi-kid line and have Casey have 2 young guys on the wing. It can't hurt that much. Great experience, especially if you start out against Vegas. And that fourth line, I would have a different anchor at center.
I mean, you do say can't hurt much. It very well could. It could totally backfire. We don't know.
Haven't lost a game yet.
And then that just speaks to what your third line would be. If Ritchie is on your second line, then your third line is your Roaring 20s line all day, every day. Your fourth line is where it gets interesting again. I think Ivan has played himself into a position here. He's had outside of Malinsky and Kovalenko and Ritchie, Ivan's probably had your best camp. So I think he has placed himself on a fourth line. And who's your other guys? I really like Parker Kelly. I still like Parker Kelly. I think he's your fourth line guy. And who's your last roster forward here? Is it Kiviranta?
Yeah, I would have put Kiwi on the right. I would put Parker Kelly as the center. Honestly, like I would give Ivan that flexibility on a wing. That if the second line isn't working, jump him up there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be, because I don't know. I don't know if Ivan. I don't think he's positionally as a center. I don't believe he is. I mean, maybe he could play it, but I don't know if I'd put him. Yeah, I don't know. I just want him on the fourth line. I don't care where he plays. I just want him out there. I just want him to make the team. I think he's earned it.
And I think Parker Kelly's been around long enough where he commands that center. And honestly, just put Ivan and Kiviranta on that fourth line. I feel like you're good.
Yeah, and I haven't been impressed with Kiviranta in the preseason. Like no. I thought he had a good postseason, but or regular season last year that was good, but I don't know. Like maybe he just doesn't need to have a great preseason. Just once the season starts, you can just kick it up. Then I guess I don't know, but would I think he'd be on that fourth line to start the season? He probably could be, probably will be too. So. And then as your defense goes, we talked a lot about defense already in this episode. Obviously, you have Taves and Makar. Girard will probably be on your second pairing with Manson. And then Malinsky has got to be on your third pairing, probably with Dahan.
Yep.
And I think those are your pairings to start game one.
And then Eustace and no.
God. Day one, I don't know about that, but it will be interesting to see how many games until he makes his first start.
Yep.
That will be something interesting to see. Like, I'm sure they want to get Georgiev going, so you don't want to pull him like too soon or give him a break too soon. But is it like what, 3 games maybe, and then you give Annunen a shot? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But
I say go 2 on, 1 off.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? We'll have to see how it plays out, but it'll be interesting to watch how many games before they let Annunen give him a shot. I think it'd be early. Should be early. Get him going.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right, everyone. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode. So if you got any comments, throw them out in the comment section, and definitely sign up for our subtext because we have good conversations over there. And we'll be getting a lot of people's info on game days, predictions, and stuff like that. And we'll share all that stuff on episodes. So sign up for a subtext if you want to be included in that conversation. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. And we are one day closer to opening night. So let's get this day over with. All right. He is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli, and this is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. We're one day closer to getting Sidney Crosby in an Avalanche sweater.